राधा गोपीजन वल्लभा गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय। मथुरा वृंदावन धाम की जय। मायापुर नवदीप धाम की जय। पुरुषोत्तम क्षेत्र जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय। श्री एका चक्र धाम की जय। गंगा मैया यमुना मैया की जय। भक्ति देवी तुलसी महारानी की जय। समवेत गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। All glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees. All glories, all glories, all glories to lotus feet of Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Ajnana-timirandhasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupaha Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sarvjatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhamritamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Mukham karoti vachalam, pangvam langayate vidam, yat kripa tamaham bande, Shri Guru Dinatarinam. Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, third canto, chapter 26, verse number 33. Arthashya Shrayatvam Sabdasya Drashturlingatvam cha Tanmatratvam Chanabhaso Lakshanam Kavayo Viduhu. Arthashrayatvam sabdasya drashturlingatvam eva cha tanmatratvam chanabhaso lakshanam kavayo viduhu. Arthashrayatvam sabdasya drashturlingatvam eva cha tanmatratvam chanabhaso lakshanam kavayo viduhu. Synonyms: Artha ashrayatvam, that which conveys the meaning of an object. Shabdasya, of sound. Drashtu, of the speaker. Lingatvam, that which indicates the presence. Eva, also. Cha, and. Tat matratvam, the subtle element. Cha, and. Nabhasaha, of ether. Lakshanam, definition. Kavaya, Kavayaha, learned persons. Vidu, no. Translation purport by His Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: persons who are learned and who have true knowledge define sound as that which conveys the idea of an object, indicates the presence of a speaker screened from our view, and constitutes the subtle form of ether. Once again, persons who are learned and who have true knowledge define sound as that which conveys the idea of an object, indicates the presence of a speaker screened from our view, and constitutes the subtle form of ether. Purport: Jai Prabhupada. It is very, very clear herein that as soon as we speak of hearing, there must be a speaker. Without a speaker, there is no question of hearing. Therefore, the Vedic knowledge, which is known as Shruti, or that which is received by hearing, is also called Apaurusha. Apaurusha means not spoken by any person materially created. It is stated in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, Tene Brahma Hrida. The sound of Brahman or Veda was first impregnated into the heart of Brahma, the original learned man, Adi Kavaye. How did he become learned? Whenever there is learning, there must be a speaker and the process of hearing. But Brahma was the first created being. Who spoke to him then? Since no one was there, who was the spiritual master to give knowledge? He was the only living creature. Therefore, the Vedic knowledge was imparted within his heart by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is seated within everyone as Paramatma. Vedic knowledge is understood to be spoken by the Supreme Lord, and therefore it is free from the defects of material understanding. Material understanding is defective. If we hear something from a conditioned soul, it is full of defects. All material and mundane information is tainted by illusion, error, cheating, and imperfection of the senses. Because Vedic knowledge was imparted by the Supreme Lord, who is transcendental to material creation, it is perfect. If we receive that Vedic knowledge from Brahma in disciplic succession, then we receive perfect knowledge. Every word we hear has a meaning behind it. As soon as we hear the word water, there is a substance, water, behind the word. Similarly, as soon as we hear the word God, there is a meaning to it. If we receive that meaning and explanation of God from God Himself, then it is perfect. But if we speculate about the meaning of God, it is imperfect. Bhagavad Gita, which is the science of God, is spoken by the personality of Godhead Himself. This is perfect knowledge. Mental speculators or so-called philosophers who are researching what is actually God will never understand the nature of God. The science of God has to be understood in disciplic succession from Brahma, who was first instructed about knowledge of God by God Himself. We can understand the knowledge of God by hearing Bhagavad Gita from a person authorized in the disciplic succession. When we speak of seeing, there must be a form. by our sense perception. The beginning experience is the sky. Sky is the beginning of form, and from the sky, other forms emanate. Therefore, the object of knowledge and sense perception begin from the sky. Once again, translation. Persons who are learned and who have true knowledge define sound as that which conveys the idea of an object, indicates the presence of a speaker screened from our view, and constitutes the subtle form of ether. So, this particular verse, again, there is a description of creation. We saw there is a description from false ego, there is a description of mind and intelligence. And then false ego in mode of goodness give rise to mind in mode of passion, give rise to intelligence. And now false ego in mode of ignorance give rise to elements. Mm. And this is the creation of the beginning of the creation of elements, and there is first ether. Ether is subtly represented by the sound element. Prabhupada says at the end of the purport, ether is the beginning of form. In other words, we know, we have read, or we will read also. Ether combined with the time factor, combined with the glance of the Lord, turns into air. Then that turns into fire, then water, and then uh, earth. So the beginning is, beginning is false ego, and then there's ether, and ether is the source of the form and other elements also. Then this verse also says, when we hear a sound, then that implies that there is an object from where the sound was created. We may be screened, the eyes, or that object may be screened from our view, but just the fact that there is a sound means there is a source. So Prabhupada is speaking about, in the purport, he is convincing everyone that Brahma was the first living entity, and he heard the sound from within his heart. So if the sound was heard, means there was an object, or there was a person who spoke to Brahma. So Prabhupada is questioning in general to his audience, who was that person? When he was the first living entity, then who spoke to Brahma when there was nobody, when nobody exists there? And also, if he heard the sound, but if he cannot see, that does not mean that the object or the source is not there. It just screened from our vision. But sound is the beginning. Sound means the object or the source is there. So, coming to the understanding that then Prabhupada goes on to speak about the Vedic knowledge. Vedic knowledge, if somebody wants knowledge, then the knowledge can be acquired by hearing, if somebody wants knowledge. Now the question comes, where do we hear from? Prabhupada says we can hear from conditioned souls, but that knowledge will be imperfect because the conditioned souls have 4 defects: imperfect senses, illusion, and other 2, tendency to make mistake and cheating propensity. So when we hear from conditioned souls who have these 4 defects, then the knowledge received will also be defective. So if somebody wants knowledge, then where do we hear from? And Prabhupada connects this process of hearing with the word Shruti. So what is Shruti? Shruti, and there are 2 divisions of scripture. There is Shruti and there is Smriti. So what is Shruti? Shruti comes from the word Shrinu, and Shrinu means to hear. So Shruti means to hear. Where do we hear from? Perfect sources. And what is the perfect sources? The Vedic scriptures, Bhagavad Gita. that God or Krishna himself spoke. And why it is perfect? Because God or Krishna is beyond the four defects. So the knowledge spoken from God is called aparushya, which does not mean no personality, but no conditioned personality. Aparusha means no material personality. God himself spoke. So it's free from four defect, and if somebody wants knowledge, then one should hear. It is also called Shruti because it is directly spoken by the Lord and scripted by um, um, to Brahma. Brahma directly heard it from the Lord. So whatever is spoken directly by the Lord is called Shruti. And Smriti means when one has heard the Shrutis and one has realized, then one can reflect on what one has heard and summarize it. And that becomes Smriti. Smriti means recollection, what one has heard from Shruti. So there is no difference between Shruti and Smriti. Smriti are the Puranas, Smriti are um, like Srila Prabhupada commentary, Smriti. Um, so yeah, whatever the books are written by devotees, acharyas, goswamis, they're all Smriti because they are reflected, but then that includes Shruti also because they again and again refer to the verses from the Vedic scriptures, like Vedas and Upanishads. Then there is reference to Shruti. So there is Shruti and Smriti. So Brahma heard it from the Lord. Aparushya, pure knowledge, perfect knowledge. Then Prabhupada says how that knowledge, when received in the chain of disciplic succession, one has heard from his guru, who has heard from his guru, he has heard from his guru. When the knowledge is passed down from the chain of disciplic succession, and when we hear from that people, those personalities who are repeating, who come under disciplic succession, um, then that is also perfect knowledge. And it will become imperfect when a person puts his, if he's a conditioned soul, and if he puts his commentary, then again it becomes imperfect. But if the knowledge is passed down as it is coming from disciplic succession, then it's a perfect knowledge. And Prabhupada says, I am repeating as it is, not adding or removing anything. So it becomes perfect knowledge. Um, so this is how the knowledge is heard from Shruti. Today is also the, I think, appearance day of Vrindavan Das Thakur. I checked in the calendar today. So Vrindavan Das Thakur, just something, quick 5 minutes. I think there is not much told about his life, just like Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami. Not much is known about him. I mean, we know little bit, but we don't know much in detail about Vrindavan Das Thakur. Few things we know that he was the son of Narayani in God Leela. Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami describes that Vyasadeva appeared 500 years back in the womb of Narayani as Vrindavan Das. Narayani is mentioned as like there were, I think, 3 or 4 brothers. There was Srivas Thakur, then there was Srinidhi, there was Shripati, and there was, I think, one more. There were 4 brothers. So Shiva's elder brother, his name was Srinidhi, and Srinidhi has a daughter whose name was Narayani. And Narayani was one of the recipient of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy. This is during the Sankirtan in the house of Shivas Thakur, specifically during the time when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was in his most ecstatic mood and he was giving benedictions and revealing the transcendental relationship all the devotees have with Krishna. And it was like most merciful. That time, Shivas Thakur niece Narayani also happened to be there. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in his ecstatic love, he told Narayani, Narayani, chant the name of Krishna. And when it came from Mahaprabhu, Narayani, chant the name of Krishna. Narayani became mad. She started crying. When she chanted Krishna, 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 her voice choked up. She started, like, tears started coming from his eyes. She could not speak. It created such spiritual pleasure, such divinity, such ecstasy, that she lied down, rolling on the ground, became like a mad girl, 4 years old, chanting Krishna, Krishna. And when everybody saw how Narayani received the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, everybody was very happy. Mm. At that point of time, Narayani was blessed, and because of Mahaprabhu's mercy, Vyasadeva himself entered the womb of Narayani and appeared as Vrindavan Das Thakur with the name Vrindavan Das Thakur. Narayani originally, after her marriage, she would live in, there is a place called Kumarhatta or Mamgachi. Um, Kumarhatta, Mamgachi are two different places. Some people say Vrindavan Das Thakur appeared in Mamgachi. Some also say Kumarhatta, but right now we have Vrindavan Das Thakur home. Nonetheless, wherever he appeared, Vrindavan Das Thakur, with his mother Narayani and her husband, they all would live in a place called Mamgachi, independent of where he appeared. When devotees go to Mamgachi, there is also the Gaunitai deities, which were personally being worshipped by Vrindavan Das Thakur. Vrindavan Das Thakur appeared a few years after Mahaprabhu took sannyas, and which is because this Mahaprakash Leela happened when Mahaprabhu was um, like maybe around 20, between 18 and 20, Mahaprakash Leela happened. Then after 24 years, Mahaprabhu took sannyas. And then many years after he took sannyas. So Vrindavan Das Thakur was very young, but he was existing when Mahaprabhu was also there on the planet. Then Vrindavan Das Thakur's father passed away, and Narayani with Vrindavan Das Thakur. Vrindavan Das Thakur did his education from Mamgachi, and then they moved to another place. They were actually then under the care of Shivasacharya um, and Malini Devi, because they did not have a husband. But both Narayani and Vrindavan Das Thakur moved to a place called Denur, where after Mahaprabhu gave instruction to Nityananda Prabhu, like then very soon after this, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu departed. But Nityananda Prabhu had this instruction to travel and spread the glories of Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu gave him that instruction. So Vrindavan Das Thakur is described as the last disciple of Nityananda Prabhu. So it was quite late because Nityananda Prabhu lived quite long after Mahaprabhu's departure. He lived for at least few more years. And then when Nityananda Prabhu was going through Dhenur, this village, that's where there is the conversation where Vrindavan Das Thakur met his guru, Nityananda Prabhu. There is a particular instance where when Vrindavan Das Thakur was personally acting as a personal servant of Nityananda Prabhu, then Nityananda Prabhu asked in the afternoon after lunch, he asked Vrindavan Das Thakur that do you have some haritaki? Haritaki is like a mouth freshener, a digestive thing, which usually it is taken after the meal. So Nityananda Prabhu asked Vrindavan Das Thakur. Vrindavan Das Thakur is already tied in some kind of wrapper in his dhoti. He immediately took and he gave to Nityananda Prabhu. And then Nityananda Prabhu was unhappy. Nityananda Prabhu said, how do you have it with you? And Vrindavan Das Thakur said that I knew that you would request for it. So I already had arranged for it in the morning itself when I was begging. So Nityananda Prabhu was externally unhappy, and he told Vrindavan Das Thakur that people in renounced order should not save, rather they should depend on Krishna. Uh, mm, because saving mentality removes the opportunity to depend on Krishna, because then we depend upon our arrangements for the future. I have everything set, I have everything set. And then we depend on our intelligence, and we depend upon our organizational skills and many other things. And then we don't depend upon Krishna. So Nityananda Prabhu told that people in renounced order should not act like this. Then Nitai told Vrindavan Das Thakur that you stay here only. And apparently, Vrindavan Das Thakur, he actually wanted to travel with Nityananda Prabhu. But when he was told that you stay here, then he was very sad at that point of time. He took it as Nitai is unhappy with me, and this is my punishment. I have to stay here. But everything that Guru does, whether they speak out of anger, whether they speak out of love, everything is a mercy, because it is ultimately for the welfare of the other living entities. So Nityananda Prabhu told him to stay there, but internally Nityananda Prabhu's desire was that Vrindavan Das Thakur is Vyasadeva. He knew Vrindavan Das Thakur will write a book. It is said that Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he read Chaitanya Bhagavat like 18 or 20 times, the entire Chaitanya Bhagavat. So Chaitanya Bhagavat was very, very dear, and is very, very dear to most of the associates of Lord Chaitanya. There is also an instance that before Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami wrote Chaitanya Charitamrita, all the devotees, all the associates of the Lord in Vrindavan, including Rup Sanatana Goswami and others, they all would discuss from Chaitanya Bhagavat. That was the book to refer to Mahaprabhu's pastimes. Every day there was recitation, discussion from Chaitanya Bhagavat. And then because Chaitanya Bhagavat did not describe in detail about the ending pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, then there was a need, and which was known to Raghunath Das Goswami, then there was a need for somebody to compose that literature for the completeness of the pastime of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And right at that point of time, everybody recognized Krishna Das Goswami, who recently wrote a book called Govinda Lilamrita. When devotees read that book, it is a book that Prabhupada says one should read only when one is at the stage of bhava or prema. We usually don't read such books. They are quite esoteric by nature. But Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami, when they wrote, because those devotees are pure devotees of Krishna, when they read, they became very much absorbed in Krishna's pastimes, and they all applauded the skills and the realization and the revelation of Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami. Krishna's Goswami. Jiva Goswami, when he read this book by Krishna's Goswami, he gave Krishna's Goswami the title Krishna's Kaviraj. That's where Krishnadas received the title Kaviraj. Kaviraj means the best among all the poets. Nobody describes the pastimes of the Lord the way Krishnadas describes. That's why, and Jiva Goswami gave many titles to many devotees. He was the leader of Vrindavan. He gave the title of Thakur to Narottam Das, gave the title of Acharya to Srinivas, gave the title of Pandit to Syamananda, gave a title of Kaviraj to Krishnadas. So he would give many titles. And then all the devotees unanimously agree that the best person who can describe the pastime of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishnadas Goswami, now Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami. Primarily because he is very qualified. It is clearly seen from his previous book. And also he personally heard it from Raghunath Das Goswami. And Raghunath Das Goswami, he gave the notes that of Murari Gupta had a notes called Chaitanya Charita. That book is also there. Then Swarup Damodar Goswami has his own notes that don't exist today. Murari Gupta notes exist, but Raghunath Das Goswami has his own notes. Swarup Damodar notes were given. Everything was passed on to Krishnadas along with what he has heard from personal realization of Raghunath Das Goswami based on that Chaitanya Charitamrita. The summum bonum of Mahaprabhu's pastimes was released. But in his book, Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami also, with like millions of mouths, he glorifies Vrindavan Das Thakur's Chaitanya Bhagavat. This book, Chaitanya Bhagavat, was initially called Chaitanya Mangal, but when Lochan Das Thakur released a book and he named it Chaitanya Mangal, then Vrindavan Das Thakur Chaitanya Mangal originally became known as Chaitanya Bhagavat, just so there is no confusion. So we have Lochan Das Thakur Chaitanya Mangal, Vrindavan Das Thakur Chaitanya Bhagavat, Murari Gupta Chaitanya Charita, then Chaitanya Chandrodaya by Shivananda Sen's son, Kavi Karnapur, Chaitanya Charitamrita by Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami. And there are actually more books. There are many books describing the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Vrindavan Das Thakur, apparently because of the displeasure of Nityananda Prabhu, asked him that you stay here, and he left because Nityananda Prabhu wanted him to spend day and night in composing a literature that actually glorifies Mahaprabhu's pastimes. So he got all the time and he would write there. There is a place where Vrindavan Das Thakur, I think it's in Mamgachi only, or Dhenur, one of the two places. There is a place where Vrindavan Das Thakur composed Chaitanya Bhagavat. There is also the place on the bank of Radhakund where Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami composed Chaitanya Charitamrita. Then also after Nityananda Prabhu gave I think it's in Mamgachi only. After Nityananda Prabhu, when Vrindavan Das Thakur gave that freshener, digestive freshener, it's called Haritaki, to Nityananda Prabhu. After Nityananda Prabhu chew that, then he, it's like you chew it and then you remove it from your mouth, you spit it. Then Vrindavan Das Thakur, he sowed that into the ground after Nityananda Prabhu left. And from there came a Haritaki tree from that. That tree is still there. There is also the Charan footsteps of Nityananda Prabhu there. Then there is a Gaunitai deity there. So there are many places. It's a place basically connected to Vrindavan Das Thakur, whose appearance day is today. There is also a description of Vrindavan after. Then Nityananda Prabhu departed soon after. Then there is a description of how Vrindavan Das Thakur would assist Janava Mata in her preaching activities. And sometimes he would travel with her also. There is a particular instance mentioned that Janava Mata, when she was traveling to different devotees' homes, she also came to the house of Vrindavan Das Thakur, Mamgachi. Very beautiful place. It is around 1 hour drive from Katwa. Katwa is a place where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas from Keshav Bharati. Then Keshav Bharati also belonged to this village where Vrindavan Das Thakur was there. So something connected to Keshav Bharati is also there in the same village. Then there is an instance where Janva Mata, she came to the house of Vrindavan Das Thakur and she invited Vrindavan Das Thakur to join for the first God Purnima celebration conducted by Narottam Das Thakur in Kheturi. That was the first God Purnima festival where Nityananda Prabhu Mahaprabhu personally told Janva Mata that you oversee the whole arrangements of this first God Purnima festival. And Nityananda Prabhu also told Janva Mata that I will personally appear and give my darshan in this Kheturi. There were 7 God Netais, I believe, or 3, don't remember. like multiple sets of god Nitai installed. They went to different temples. One of the set is Meka Chakra also from there. So Vrindavan Das Thakur also accompanied Janva Mata in that Kheturi festival. So there are some description of his participation there. All right. Are there any discussion? That's all I can say today.
No questions, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for the wonderful class.
Thank you. And we just shared something about Vrindavan Das Thakur. It's nice to remember him, especially on such occasions. Okay. So I guess we will end here. Thank you all for joining. If I spoke anything wrong, please forgive me as your humble servant. Vancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namo. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you very much. Dhamma pranams, Prabhuji's Mataji's, Hare Krishna.
Raman and Krishna Prabhu ki jai. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.